All right, I'm standing in for our audio and video. We are in transition. Brian is on a brand new machine, so welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host and sound effects and video effects, Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers. We are produced by Brian Foster, man of a new computer, who you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Say, Brian.
What's going on, Dre? It's same computer, but slightly different. So we'll see if the upgrades help with performance and whatnot. But good to talk to you guys, as always.
And we are joined by co-host Andrew Sutton, who is here to discuss all things EuroLeague because I have literally nothing to say on it. All right, so break down our show. We're going to talk a little Euro handle. We're going to talk half of NBA teams losing money. The best Plumlee finds the worst contract, and the eye test. So let's get going. I'm going to put the boring one first. Andrew, do you have anything to say? EuroLeague stuff's going on right now. A lot of people on Twitter seem excited. Some people are basically saying I may have to eat some crow about Kristaps Porzingis if he brings that stuff back to the States when he comes back. But anything to say there?
Just get on this Doncic train before it gets too crowded, and I don't know too much about Porzingis. I don't really doubt it because I think I've seen enough to a point where he doesn't rebound enough. He's just a shot blocking small forward, basically.
Well, more importantly, a shot blocking small forward that is played as a center or a power forward. Like if you look at the number, if you look at lineups New York is rolling out, you can't make the argument that he's being rolled out as a small forward, or even. This is the example we always come back to at Dirk Nowitzki. There was a brief window in time where they had Sean Marion. Now, to be fair, Sean Marion is very much a Draymond Green character, where you cannot point at Sean Marion or Draymond Green and say, just get one of them, because it turns out in NBA history, the small forward, power forward that plays amazingly well at both positions is actually pretty rare. There aren't that many of them that do it that well. And as we noted on last week's show, Brian, when we were bashing the Morris brothers, lots of teams get players that they think do that, and then when we break down the numbers, we basically say, not only do they not play power forward well, they don't play small forward well. So you're basically getting the worst of both worlds. You're playing a small forward at power forward to play below average at both positions.
Is this the Aziz Ansari rule, Dre, the master of none?
Oh, interesting. That I didn't know how you're going to make that connection because we were talking about these pre-shows. But yeah, by the way, if you haven't checked out Master of None, which by the way does drop several references to Kristaps Porzingis, check it out.
I've never actually seen it.
What?
I know. I love him too. I love Aziz, but
yeah,
I need to catch up.
And you actually have to stop producing a show right now and go watch Master of None.
All right. So, no.
All right, so sorry, Andrew, I went along tangent there.
But it's not too many surprises. A lot of your NBA Europeans are dominating over there in the Eurobasket. The Gasol brothers, Hernan Gomez brothers, Valanciunas is dominating. Zoran Dragic is dominating. So it's not really a surprise from like an NBA standpoint. The NBA European guys are dominating a European league that's featuring non-NBA players. So it's not really surprising that those guys stand out.
All right, Andrew, what are your thoughts on the Gasol brothers, who both, you said, look good in EuroLeague, but both in the NBA last season did seem to be getting older and losing maybe a step?
I think Paul Gasol, older brother Gasol, was actually pretty good in spots as far as coming off the bench and then starting in spots. So he's actually still effective, I think. I think Pop is going to manage his minutes and extend his career maybe 1 or 2 more seasons. Unlike Dirk over there in Dallas, I think he's just done. I think he's done. But Mark has always been kind of overrated to me. Always. Yeah. Even from a defensive standpoint. He's not that great of a defender where it's just we can sacrifice his offensive game because he's not as efficient as his brother.
Well, I mean, don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole. We might talk in a bit, but it's just like we've always kind of done the thing where individual defense is a lot harder to pin down than you think, and sometimes it can be masked in a good system or lost in a bad system. So it's one of those where even if he was as good as people think, it's kind of hard to know because he's been on some very good defensive teams. You could argue, Tony Allen, Zach Randolph when he was healthy, Mike Conley. He's been next to some good defensive players, so it's hard to know how much was him or how much was the system, and that is always going to be something we can't really pull apart.
Yeah, and me being a pro player guy, I feel bad for Mike Conley because he's not going to be on a contender, even though he's $200 million man, and he's just not going to be on a contender for a couple of years.
Well, to be fair, a big reason, and so I guess it's easy. It's his fault. They're not his fault and like the blame him, but if he's going to take that $30 million, that's going to do a lot. I'm actually going to use that as an excuse to talk the next topic. Speaking of $30 million men, Paul Millsap is set to make $30 million over 3 seasons with the Denver Nuggets. Now, so we're clear. I said we have to come up with a term for this because early in his career with Utah, and then when he was picked up by Atlanta, we thought Paul Millsap is a star player and a great pickup. And however, this very, very simple logic, he's now over 30. And if you look at his numbers the last few seasons, Brian, if you want to pull that up at the Boxscore Geeks, Paul Millsap over the last few years, last season he lost a step. And I really, this seems like another dumb rule. We were talking a lot about rules we like, Andrew, pre-show. If you are going to call someone good at offense, I swear to God, if they have below average true shooting, really the conversation to me ends there if you're using it as a dominant offensive threat. I would say Ben Wallace was useful on offense because of all the offensive rebounds. But if anybody ever came to me and said Ben Wallace is a dominant offensive threat, I would say get out of here. Paul Millsap last season had a below league average true shooting. So you can't point to Paul Millsap and say he's an offensive threat. And you cannot convince me that the fact that he scores close to 20 points a game is not why he gets the money, because his defensive numbers look okay. His rebounding looks all right. But everyone knows he was picked up for his offense and passing, and I'm hopeful that he's going to be good.
What about guys like, say, Ricky Rubio that are really good assist-to-turnover guys, but maybe aren't the best shooters? Can they get a reprieve on being good offensive players?
Well, no. If you call Paul Millsap an offensive threat, it's the same with Russell Westbrook, by the way, which I have no complaints bashing of this. Oh, he's average. He is league average. If you say Russell Westbrook is a potent offensive threat, and actually doing a throwback to last week's show, Tracy McGrady finished his career 51.2% true shooting. You can't tell me Tracy McGrady was a potent offensive threat because he shot below league average. So you can call Ricky Rubio an offensive facilitator, but no one... the noise in the background would not ever call Ricky Rubio an offensive scoring
That's
threat.
Fair.
Oh, so sorry. So the final point was just Paul Millsap's making $30 million, but the Nuggets just picked up Mason Plumlee for $14 million a season for 3 seasons, which I love this move, but I've seen a lot of people bash it already.
I'm just gonna people who quote Paul Millsap's 3-point percentage and his offensive rating, don't do that, because to me that's it's a sampling type of thing. Where offensive ratings is basically a team thing. So he can be on a good offensive team, and he can be a negative as far as his true shooting percentage and effective field goal. I see that a lot on Twitter, especially NBA Twitter. They quote the team offensive ratings and defensive ratings.
I'm so mad because, again, the wins produced metric, because Dave Barry actually included team defense as a regression variable, got a lot of, there's a team component. He got bashed for that for years. It was amazingly effective branding on the part of win shares, and that they just called it defensive win shares, because really defensive win shares is a team component. And then to your point, even both if you break down the formula, both offensive rating and defensive rating for players are based on the team. So I mean, you can do this. A player. It's not easy to do, Brian. I don't even remember the season. But if you go look at Emeka Okafor, the only reason I remember this because he was perfect. He had 2 seasons in a row, whereas his box score line, boom, looks virtually identical. The numbers he put up on the box score look virtually identical. But if you look at his offensive rating and defensive rating, they shift, and it's because the quality of his team changed. So it's one of those aspects where I think you're right. Like people are branded into believing when I say Paul Millsap's good at offense because his offensive rating, they don't know how the formula works.
Right. He's basically getting credit for other people's achievements.
And I mean, it's possible. It's entirely possible that he does improve his teammates, but I'm not, it's an interesting one where we saw this with a Kobe assist, which is 100% apt because he played next to Dwight Howard, and Dwight Howard played amazing. I was laughing when Kurt Goldsberry released a piece saying Kobe's misses improve Pau Gasol and Dwight Howard's rebounding, instead of going the other rational explanation, which is maybe Pau Gasol and Dwight Howard are really good rebounders who help save some bad shots from Kobe.
And those rebounds help the team, not Kobe's misses.
Exactly. And I mean, also, you can't be fooled into thinking that anybody would ever want a shot, rebound, another shot, as opposed to just a made shot. A made shot trumps that every day of the week.
Well, no, exactly, Dre. So if you look at it in terms of, Dean Oliver's 4 factors, basically, right? Like how much each of those things contribute to winning, the shooting percentage and the efficiency is a huge part of it, like a really big part of it.
But it's also, what's funny is when we track the numbers season to season, those are the most inconsistent. So it's funny. That's what people chase. And instead of saying to themselves, maybe Paul Millsap's offensive rating looks good because he played next to, who was the point guard last year? Did they actually have a decent point guard?
The Schroeder was kind of slightly below average, so he wasn't that great.
That was I can't believe they got rid of Teague. Like, that was what's funny, right? Like, Teague was so cheap, and they got rid of him for nothing, and he ended up on the Wolves of all teams. But yeah, you can't necessarily say whose fault it was and how much it'll track. And the bigger point to me for Paul Millsap is age. But that being said, I love Mason Plumlee, but what made that amusing to me is now Paul Millsap is now making more than Plumlee, Fareed, and Jokic put together, which is funny because odds are one of Plumlee or Fareed is going to get traded. I'm waiting for it to happen. It's going to make me sad.
And this is why Denver can't have nice things. Because there was a stretch with George Karl that they were like one of the best offensive teams, and it's funny that they didn't really they didn't have much playoff success. Kind of funny, kind of.
Yeah, well, it was that was
wasted years.
One of my first articles is George Karl was routinely one of those people that would play the wrong lineups in the playoffs and wouldn't realize it was those bench guys that were getting him the wins, not playing Melo and J.R. Smith 45 minutes a game. I don't have much to say, much else on Denver, but did want to throw that out. Good job for getting Mason Plumlee. If you're looking for an analytics job, the Kroenke group is hiring, so I'll try and include a link to that in the show notes if I remember it. Maybe help them out and say, hey, point guards in the NBA, I'm not asking for a great one. I'm not even asking for a good one. I'm just asking for better than Moutier, which is not a hard sell because he is one of the worst players in the NBA. So what makes him amazing to me is Moutier, not even era adjusted, has some of the worst scoring seasons in NBA history. And when you factor in the fact that like the NBA has been getting better and better and better at scoring, he's even worse. Like he looks like a bad 1960s shooter in a 2000s era where we've got players like Steph Curry and James Harden who can drain threes from the half.
Sorry, Dre.
Yep. What was that? A moment of silence for Dre's Nuggets. All right.
Yes. But Mason Plumlee's great.
Mason Plumlee is great. The best Plumlee. Let's get into a very funny one. This had you smiling pre-show so much, Andrew. Here's what happened. Here's the full story. I think. Tell me, either of you cut me off and let me know if I get this wrong. A fan tweeted at Tracy McGrady like, "Hey man, I respect you, but can't believe, why would you leave the Thunder for any reason other than a title?" Which to me is bizarre because leaving the Thunder for a title seems perfectly legit. And I think the only argument I would have against OKC versus San Francisco is being able to afford a place to live in San Francisco. And obviously, Kevin Durant's going to have no problem with that. So like, I can't see anybody who, if they were given the choice, live in OKC, live in San Francisco, who would pick OKC? All right, so they said something like that. Now Kevin Durant responded from his Twitter account, but he responded speaking about himself in the second person, which led many to believe, I believe rightfully so, that he has a second, at least one Twitter account that he uses to respond to haters. And the second Twitter account said, Kevin Durant didn't like playing for Billy Donovan. that the rest of the Thunder were trash outside of Russell Westbrook, and then if you were to take Russell Westbrook off the Thunder, don't forget when Kevin Durant left the Thunder, Russell Westbrook hadn't resigned yet. So basically, he was saying, if you had taken that Thunder's team and if they had lost Russell Westbrook, they're not doing anything. So that was his response. But what's turned this into kind of a cluster at this point is because people realized, Kevin Durant's arguing with haters online from an anonymous account. Although to me, what's funny, Brian was curious about what we have to say. At least all I'll say to start is I have no complaints with any of his comments. Like those are all well thought out. If someone said, "Why did you leave your job except for winning a title?" which already is like a dumb start. Like winning a title is fine. I didn't like my boss. I only had one good coworker, and outside of that one good coworker, I didn't like the rest of my coworkers. Perfectly legit reason to leave a job.
I'm just gonna go with the obvious kind of irony here that you're in Silicon Valley and you don't know how to log out of your account and log into your other hidden account. It's just so funny. That's my main thing. Was so funny.
I will say this as someone who has, for instance, I'm not as active as I would like to be with it, but we have the Boxscore Geeks Twitter account. I have this Twitter account. I have one other Twitter account. It is really easy to confuse them, and luckily none of my it's not the like work versus away, but we've seen this, right? Like Wendy's tweets out something, and you're like, I don't think that was supposed to be the Wendy's official Twitter account. I think I was supposed to be whatever intern is paid to be the social media person. So it's a very common mistake, and I mean we can at least point this out. Kevin Durant has 1 year of college, right? It's not like he's a tech expert just because he's in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. That was just a joke. But but Kevin Durant's kind of known for like going back and forth with people, like roasting people on Twitter. So it's kind of funny that he would have a backup Twitter account just to do that when he's known for just going at people on Twitter from his primary account.
You guys probably remember. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, go for it. What do you got?
All I was going to say is you guys probably remember this, but he's also famous for tweeting with some frat guys during the lockout and then driving to their college and playing flag football against them or something like that. He's a man of the people at times.
Yeah, do you have as the Warriors guy, do you have any opinions on this? Because obviously he's getting some flack for it. Although you were bored because I guess the rumor is that Draymond Green convinced him just own up, just fess up. Don't try and say you were hacked. Don't try and say it was a mistake. Just come out and admit and own up to it. And he has, and he's still getting roasted for it. It's still a big story. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're in the dog days of the offseason, and there's only so much we can argue about Carmelo Anthony being rated too high or too low. So we're grabbing onto this story for dear life. But
that's very true.
I do think that was what he came out with. So do you have any opinions as a Warriors fan about it?
He doesn't. And he doesn't. He has he doesn't have a great relationship with the media. He's always been kind of contentious. More importantly, lately, how his kind of disdain for the media and how they can twist his words or paint him in a bad light or whatever. Which I feel like a lot of athletes kind of feel that way. But hey,
it's really true. I saw a great tweet about this where Jennifer Lawrence made a comment in an interview. And it was taken out of context for a headline, and the AP picked it up. And so basically, it was being reported, Jennifer Lawrence says this, Jennifer Lawrence says this, Jennifer Lawrence says this. And if you just trace back the original comment, you said that is, first off, not even what she said. And second off, if you were to pull out the line that sounded similar to that and put it in the context of the full thing, that's clearly not even what she meant. And I think you as a sports athlete learn very quickly, if the media has a take they want on you, they can go down that rabbit hole, right? Like they can say, if they love Durant, they could say Durant had to leave the Thunder because he wanted to win and blah, blah, blah. But if they don't like him, they can paint him as a backstabber. So I don't think he's wrong to be distrustful of the media. And certainly because of the decision, we've seen this happen to LeBron. We've seen this happen to Durant. Now, the media really hates, I'll put in quotes, decisions for whatever reason. And so I can't fault him for being contentious with him, although it is just funny to note the ego and the fragility of the ego. I don't actually have this. I don't want this as a complaint. It's just interesting to note that you can be on top of the world, right? This is the finals MVP, former NBA MVP, highest paid player on the best team in the NBA, And, a person on Twitter can still sting. So there's that.
Yeah, and this is... Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say also he sucks as a GM because it's just not it's not just him and Westbrook on that team that were pretty good. Like Adams was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was a couple
Robertson,
solid.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean it's so one of the things he was saying, I guess today after this all went down, was just how much he was into this thing. Like he said he didn't sleep for 2 days and he's been all worried about it and all this crap. I mean, maybe he's just saying that and he's just kind of fucking around with people, but I can see him being that kind of guy as well. Like that's how you get to where you are in the NBA. I mean, obviously he's got the physical gifts, but he does seem like the kind of guy who really cares about stuff and is not the type to say just fuck it and move on like I probably would. So yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, I guess. So here's the reason I said this ended up being boring to me is that there was thought at some point that it could have been one of his agents or one of his media guys putting them out instead, and if like two different people had been doing it, that would have been kind of weird.
Right, like wasn't me, it was someone in my staff or whatever.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that the not saying I was hacked is pretty original. I cannot believe that most people think they can say that, and I don't have like social media analytics here, but I thought that at least Reddit and Twitter were a little bit kinder to him after he came clean. I don't think he got as much hate as other people have for some other things. So I think most people are on his side about this.
Yeah.
I doubt he lost sleep over it, though. It's not anything criminally bad, so I don't think that phrasing of using that as saying I lost sleep, I don't think he lost sleep over this.
Well, he specifically said I didn't sleep for 2 days.
Yeah, he's exaggerating. It just sounds good for him to feel like he's empathizing so heavily with this, but it's just...
But I'm saying, I'll just fire back and say we don't know, because why the hell is he arguing with like a random tweeter? And by the way, we'll say this is a blogger. I've seen this too, right? Anybody that's ever run a blog or a Twitter account that gets thousands of followers or thousands of page views, there's going to be this one commenter that just says something, and you get in an argument. There've been a few times. You'll appreciate this, Andrew. Back when I was kind of the moderator at the Wages of Wins with Dave Barry, there were a few times I kind of had to like go and grab Dave and be like, get away from the comment section. Just we'll delete the comment. Just calm down. You're a college professor. You don't need to, go do something else. You don't need to argue with someone in the comment section. And I would do it too, right? I'd argue in the comment section. Patrick's argued in the comment section. It is so tempting when someone pushes the right button to get in a fight, even if they're a nobody, and even if, in Kevin Durant's case, you're on top of the world. So I think that is somewhat important. And I like Brian's point where it's hard to know. And like we've seen that, like Michael Jordan clearly had a very skewed perception of himself, in the sense that he saw enemies everywhere where there weren't. And so it is sometimes a little fascinating to get even just a sliver of insight into the mindset of some of the top athletes, because it is not normal, and I wouldn't expect it to be normal, right? I wouldn't expect someone who's devoted their entire life to the craft of basketball from age, probably 16 at minimum on, to come out acting the same way as someone who, like spent 6 years in college because they messed around and, is now like an actuary at age 35.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm being a skeptic, so I'm kind of doubtful of his level of caring. I will acknowledge that, yes, he does. He's kind of passionate with like the back and forth with when people try to hate on him and stuff and comments and stuff. But I don't think he's losing sleep. Even when LeBron was going through his decision thing, I know it was kind of a stressful time, but I'm pretty sure he's sleeping pretty good still.
Hope so. Yeah, it's like one of them Casper mattresses that if we were a slightly bigger podcast, we'd be plugging about now. Okay, so one thing he shouldn't be leaving sleep over is the Warriors are doing fantastic in terms of money, even accounting for revenue sharing. Now, what is interesting is we're going to get a same old story, which I'm a little sad about because it probably means a lockout is coming. Half of NBA teams, according to a leaked report, are losing money. Now, we're going to argue some semantics there. And then after you factor in revenue sharing and factor in owed debts, 10 teams in the NBA are losing money, according to a leaked source from the NBA. Now,
this is just to interrupt real fast. This was a big ESPN story. Zach Lowe and Brian Windhorst.
Yeehaw!
They're the ones who got this stuff.
To leak to say the teams. By the way, this seems like a very strategic leak in my opinion. If you've got a CBA coming up and you're going to want to argue that you don't want to pay your players as much, you want to leak that you're losing money. And this exact same thing happened before the last lockout. The teams that are losing money, though, I think this is important. The Bucks, small market team. The Grizzlies, small market team. The Hawks, I guess Andrew doesn't buy. You're in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
You don't buy. You don't buy season tickets. It's all on you. The Hornets, small market team. The Magic, I think, relative to Florida, they're a small market team, right? I think Miami's much bigger. I don't know.
Yeah, Miami's much bigger, yeah.
Magic, the Nets. The Nets are an interesting one. We'll talk to them maybe in a bit. The Pacers, small market team. The Pistons, big market, but, Detroit's been hit pretty bad. Trailblazers, small market team. And the Wizards. The Wizards actually surprised me a little bit, to be candid. So you've got, of the 10 teams that are listed as actually being in the red, get that right? Yeah, it's black as if you're making money, red as if you're losing, right? Oh, yeah. Counting terms confused. Basically, 7 of the teams are small market teams. And of the big market teams, I mean, let's just be candid, like the Nets are pretty bad. And the Hawks are really the only kind of weird one here to me, where they're actually a pretty reasonable team. And I don't know the 100% the reason for, they just don't have engagement or whatever. But is what it is. And it's baffling to me the amount of hubris to assume that every NBA team should be making money, since all of them are run by billionaire capitalists. If these are all businesses, if you don't make money, it's kind of on you. And then one of the quotes that I tweeted about, Brian, was one of the owners of a small market team complained, the NBA, if you're a small market team, wants you to work really hard to make money. But if you're a big market team, they don't care because you can make money even if you do stupid stuff. Obviously, the Knicks are like the second, behind the Warriors, are like the second highest revenue team. And it's because they're the only team, this is so mean to the Nets, but they're the only team anybody wants to watch in New York. That should tell you how bad the Nets are. But to that point, I just responded, well, that kind of answers why the hell do you the problem isn't well-run teams, it's small markets. Why are you having so many teams in small markets? So those are my 2 big takeaways. It's like, it's really weird that this is getting reported as if every team deserves to be making money. There's some bad teams, right? Like the Hornets have been run terribly, and last season they were unlucky, let's give them that, but have traditionally been a losing team. The Nets are a horrible team. The Magic have been a horrible team. The Bucks, small markets, like these teams don't deserve to just make money just because. And then, the second part of that is it's kind of the NBA's fault for, if they're going to run the team. By the way, it is worth noting, for all of the capitalism that billionaire owners seem to want, when they have the NBA essentially has a minimum wage, because you are forced to spend 80% of the salary cap. So the NBA has a minimum wage and has revenue sharing. So those are both very, I guess, quote unquote, socialist ideas. If the NBA is going to operate this way, why are you putting teams in bad markets?
So right, I have an answer. Go ahead.
Because I'm looking at California, they should at least have 3, maybe 4 teams
in their major markets. They have.
Well, yeah, in LA. I mean, in LA, Chicago should have at least two teams.
I'll put a weird side note there. Like as just a note from like why the hell Milwaukee doesn't deserve a team. I went to a Milwaukee Bucks game. They were playing the Chicago Cubs, and obviously both of those teams were at the time vying much more closely for the division. It was all Cubs fans. It was it was basically just as much of a drive from Chicago to Milwaukee as it was for me to drive from Appleton, or if Appleton's very close to Green Bay, to Milwaukee. Milwaukee has no business having a team. Chicago has enough people that they can overflow Milwaukee if they want to go to a game. So instead of that, why don't you just have another stadium or another team in whatever the stadium in Chicago is called? I actually believe Chicago is the highest capacity, or was a few years ago, the highest capacity stadium in the NBA. They could easily support a second team, which would make way more sense than having a team in Milwaukee, which really does not have the infrastructure to support a team given how small the city is.
Yeah. And Madison Square Garden could have 2 teams that occupy that arena.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you can call one of them Manhattan or something because it's in Manhattan, so you just call them a Manhattan, whatever. But it's like Man United, and then you got Man City. So in Europe, in soccer, there's a lot of teams in England and the UK. So I don't see what's the problem over here.
You go where the money is, and then in the NBA, we have people that are shocked. They're like, do you really want to take a team out of Utah? By the way, is like Utah and Green Bay in sports. By the way, I will give it to them. Are these two kind of shining gem outliers that people will use that don't make sense? Which is they are these small market teams that do have such a ravenous fan base that they are able to support their team. But in both cases, right, the Utah Jazz, despite not having won an NBA Finals, thanks to the legacy of I almost said Kareem, of Karl Malone and John Stockton, and they had Darren Williams and Carlos Boozer, and now they should have had Gobert and Hayward, but it's what it is. But I'm looking forward to Rubio and Gobert. They've had this great legacy, so they have a big fan base. The Green Bay Packers have a ravenous fan base. That's it. Like, you need to literally have a winning team with a ravenous fan base to barely break even as a small market team. And these are outliers. These aren't things you should count on. I keep using it, Andrew, since you brought it up a few podcasts ago, the act as if a small market team is going to have moderate interest in the sport. Don't act as if everybody is going to bleed that team.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing about Green Bay is that isn't it like publicly owned team? Is that it?
It's interesting because it's publicly owned, but it's like you're not like basically they sold stock in the team, but you aren't allowed to sell the team. But yeah, like that's a large part of how they raise capital is the fans basically paid for parts of the team.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I think those are good examples because I think the reason why we're where we are right now is because of the history and tradition, right? Back in the day, all these teams were just like club teams basically. And then they eventually started pro leagues that were very small. And a lot of these, small market teams have been around for a long time, especially before the big TV money blew things up, right? This is back when players were part-time players. They would have, other jobs during the off season in all the major sports. So as the leagues grew up and became these big cash cows, these, old school teams just kind of stuck around. So they can either, like Andrew is saying, do the Europe way and relegate them and try to bring in other teams. Or are we just going to say, well, we're just going to cut the league in half, or if we want to take it to the extreme, maybe just the four richest teams play each other and over again because that's where all the cash is. So obviously they've gone too far in the other direction by continuing to prop up these small markets over the years. But I can understand why they've gotten into the situation they're in, even if it's not ideal.
Well, also, what's annoying is a really simple thing they could do, since it is a league and they're trying to argue we want to maximize money, is you just in stock, because we keep comparing it. I'm putting Andrew to sleep here. But I was going to say in the NBA, instead of relegation, you could just do market swapping. You could basically say, look, Spurs, you're awesome.
Ooh.
Next season, you get to play. You get to pick. We'll let you pick, but you get to pick Los Angeles. You get to pick the Staples Center, the Madison Square Gardens, or whatever. And this would work a lot better if freaking taxpayers that funded stadiums actually took some ownership, because basically what taxpayers do, right? This happened in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin, my state. We basically just gave a big loan to a billionaire to own the stadium. If the city actually owned the stadium and said, look, you have to play and you have to agree to this, they could just do that, right? Put the better teams in the bigger markets and the worst teams in the worst markets. It's not a big deal. But they won't do anything like that. I wanted to bring that up. That
you're starting to see you saw that this season with football, the Rams and the Chargers moved to LA. So I don't think we're gonna add teams. I just think they're gonna relocate. If anything, that's more chance of that happening than as far as like adding Vancouver or adding Seattle.
Well, the biggest problem though is that the current model for NBA teams staying in a market is, will the public funding pay for a stadium? That's why the Bucks are staying in Milwaukee. That's why the Kings are staying in Sacramento. I forget, it's funny, baseball related, right, Brian? The Oakland A's have been jostling for a new stadium forever.
Shout out to Kevin Draper, who wrote a great article in the New York Times about the Oakland A's stadium. Sorry, go ahead, Dre.
But yeah, so just to that point, the current model isn't maximize profits. It's go wherever cities give us public money so a billionaire doesn't have to spend money on a stadium. And as long as that's the case, we're going to have these stupid articles about how teams are losing money, because it's like, of course you're losing operating cost money being the Milwaukee Bucks. There shouldn't be a team in Milwaukee. Last point on this though is one. We were talking. You brought this up pre-show, Andrew. Like comparing this to like movie grosses. You brought up David Prowse, I believe, the actor of Darth Vader, who agreed for a profit-sharing part of the Return of the Jedi. Who I don't even know if it's there yet, but as recently as a few years ago, said Return of the Jedi, which was until the recent Marvel boom, one of the top 10 grossing movies of all time in U.S. history, had yet to see a profit according to the movie's financials. And it's the same thing in NBA, right? We're seeing these spreadsheets that teams are saying we're losing money, and that might be true from an accounting spreadsheet. But if you look, right, you might see that they're deprecating costs of things that they shouldn't be. Or some of these teams, the Madison Square Garden group that owns the Knicks, right, can possibly put losses from one point to another. So it's like I'm not necessarily saying these teams aren't telling the truth with their spreadsheets. I'm just saying it takes a certain type of belief to believe that NBA teams, much like movies, are telling you the straightforward picture with their accounting and are doing absolutely. And this is American tax law, right? Like Trump saying he didn't pay any taxes, and that made him smart. The United States has a lot of complicated loopholes in tax laws where basically, depending on how you report your taxes, can let you say you lost money or made money, depending on how you do it. And that is what it is. And it's foolish to assume these teams run by billionaires don't have people that know how to do that.
And do you want me to read the line from the article?
Do it.
States that the numbers only focus on basketball operations. Several teams own their own arenas, and revenue they generate from hosting non-basketball events is not included in the league's basic financial reporting. For example, the Nets lost about $44 million last season, the documents show. But that doesn't account for the revenues from the Barclays Center, which the team's parent company owns. So that's what it is. And there's other stuff too. So like the Knicks are a great example of this. They own, I think, part of the MSG network, the TV side of it too, right? So a lot of these teams own even more bigger media conglomerates, and they do make a lot of money.
Well, I remember this wasn't even the same, but like I worked in a couple warehouses, and what was funny is how you built, right? So you could basically say it was billed as soon as it was put on the truck. And so I had a friend who told me that he had a manager that basically had them put a bunch of defective parts on the truck because, yes, you would get charged back for defective parts that came back, but that got charged in the next quarter because you shipped them out. So when you shipped them out, you got to do a positive balance. When they came back, it was a negative balance. So, but doing it in a clever way meant that in Q3, the money goes up. Q4, you take the loss. There are lots of ways to do stuff like that. And so when you're talking about parent companies, et cetera, yeah, you can shuffle the money around so that your NBA team loses money, but your media network makes money, right? So that's the issue. And actually that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying 100% they're doing it. I'm saying that's the problem. Every time we get reports like this, it's from the NBA. In this case, it says leaked, but even in past CBAs, it's the NBA telling us, right? And I'm saying anybody that goes in good faith in negotiating with an NBA team saying, hey, we're losing money, you need to give us money. I mean, that's how the players get suckered every single lockout is because they that good faith.
Based on my reading of this article, kind of how things are worded and what teams are referenced, it seems like the Grizzlies ownership group would be a big candidate for leaking this stuff. Based on how much it talks about the Grizzlies and how they're, a big loser. Here's another possibility, though. And again, let's talk about stadiums here. The LA Clippers, in contrast to the Lakers, whom they share Staples Center, are looking to move locally as well. According to the NBA documents, the Clippers made just $2.1 million in net income last season, despite the new media rights deal that paid them $51 million, in part because they make a lot less arena income based on tickets and other revenue than the Lakers. So how ridiculous is this? The Clippers just sold for $2 billion to Steve Ballmer, and they're worried that they're not making enough money. And they want to build a new stadium, even though these two teams, can both play in the same stadium in the same geographical area. So there you go.
It doesn't take it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. If teams are so-called losing money, that means the team's values will go down. So why are teams selling at record highs? And why are players making record amounts of money, contract money? So the two kind of contradict themselves.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, obviously that's one thing that bugs me when you said like the players making record contract money and all that. TV deals, it's like it's the market's going up, but that's capitalism, right? Like, we don't expect every car maker to turn a profit every single quarter. That's ridiculous. We accept that some car companies might lose money and some might do great. So the NBA going, why aren't we all making money? The TV money's coming, and you go, that's capitalism. You're all freaking capitalists. But irrespective of that, the last point you made about the Clippers selling, Malcolm Gladwell's written one of my favorite pieces on that, calling teams a psychic good, and even more a psychic good, meaning a good that you own because you feel good about it. I buy, it's my camera's off, but I have a statue behind me, a Ganondorf statue. I bought just because it makes me feel good. In the future, might go up in money. It's a collectible in theory. Usually, by the way, collectibles like that hold their value or just go down at best. So like in 20 years, I might be able to sell it for what I bought it for, which with inflation means I lost money if I was doing it for that. But I bought it because it makes me feel good. A lot of owners, Mark Cuban is a billionaire. There are smarter ways he could have spent his money than buying the Mavericks. But clearly owning the Mavericks, being a part of that, being able to have an image of himself holding an NBA title on Twitter, that kind of stuff makes him feel good. So it's not, he didn't buy the team because it's an investment. And then the funny part about that is, though, teams aren't, when they're saying we're losing money, they're not saying, hey, guess what? I bought this team for $400 million because the TV contract went up, because a lot of billionaires want a team. But the value of my team is now double. They don't include that. So it's a ridiculous thing. The last metaphor I'll use, and as I said, I might have to call this show Andrew Napton, because I know I'm putting you to sleep with this boring stuff, Andrew. But is, if I bought a stock and I had to pay my stockbroker some money to buy the stock, and the stock didn't have a dividend, and then I had to pay taxes on that stock because of appreciation or whatever, I could say this stock is just costing me money. But then someone could say, well, did it go up in value? And if I said, yeah, they go, well, then when you sell it, you'll make the money. So that's the annoying part about NBA teams. Leaving out that very, very important piece of information. Any one of us could sell this team for $500 million to $1 billion plus, depending on the market or whatever. The fact that every one of these teams leaves that out is the most annoying part of this to me.
Yeah, I think you see not only with like sports leagues. I think you see this with a lot of big corporations, like big brand corporations. I don't think they worry so much about profits as far as just making a lot of money, or having the funds to buy out competition.
Yeah,
I agree with that for sure.
Now,
I just saw that Toys R Us is they're either filing for bankruptcy or they're going out of business. One of the two. I can't remember.
They're filing for bankruptcy protection, but they're going to continue operating.
See?
So there you go.
What was I going to say? I was going to debate talking the eye test, but we're already at 50 minutes, and we also had a lot of technical back and forth to get the show going. So we can go in a while. We still have 3 weeks before the NBA season comes in, so we're still going to need some topics unless Russell Westbrook has a second account and we find something else out there. So that is what it is. I'll leave that at the back burner. If you've got any thoughts on the eye test you want to put in the comments, maybe we'll include it in a future show. I did not do my work. Actually, I got an easy one, Brian. Since it is dropped off as an official segment, I will say the following. Rick and Morty, oh my goodness. Obviously, they weren't going to be able to top last week's or 2 weeks ago episode, but their replacement to how am I dropping the word? The clip show that they've done every season that they replaced. Intergalactic TV or whatever it's called. Their follow-up to that was fantastic. The episode of Rick and Morty this last week was great. So I'm blown away. The show's doing great. I really hope the last 2 episodes don't disappoint.
Oh, we get to do shout-outs now, Dre? Is that where?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's just taking us to shout-outs. I'm going to skip the eye test this week and just let us out.
Yeah, I've been watching a few good things, too. I got to watch the first episode of Burns and Novick, Vietnam, the American War. Really good. Big fan of theirs in general, so I can't wait to watch the rest of that. I have to say, last week on this show, I'm going to pull... Okay, Dre, you remember this? When I criticized Nate Silver for his mea culpa on the World Cup predictions because he said 60% chance for Brazil to win. They didn't do it, and he felt all bad about it. And I said, that's dumb. 40% happens all the time.
That wasn't last week's show. That was February.
No. I did that last week. I pulled a Nate Silver. I am now Nate Silver.
Okay,
so
what?
To be.
So what did you do last week?
I said that I thought there's a 50-50 chance that South Park would do a good job with handling Charlottesville. And I thought it was really good. I want to apologize for doubting them. So I enjoyed that episode a lot.
50-50 happens all the time.
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying I'm being stupid for apologizing right now. But
okay. Oh, I see.
Like that episode. And
then like levels, because you're like, I'm going to pull a Nate Silver, not this thing that Nate Silver did, but this other thing Nate Silver did related to that thing. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry to
detract.
Very,
very meta. I know. I'm complaining about myself, complaining about Nate Silver being myself, basically. So, and then my last shout out is from that ESPN article we were just talking about. Another big thing in there is they talked about playoff revenue, that the Warriors were getting $15 million per pop in the playoffs this year, per game, that is. We haven't had that information since, I think, 10 years ago, the Nets info leak. So now we have new kind of base numbers to work on for how valuable the playoffs are. And tanking is even worse than we thought based on those numbers. So there you go. Those are my shouts.
I didn't do any pre-shout-out stuff. So, Andrew, if you've got any, cool. And if not, I'll let you be the last word, and then we can head out.
Just shout-outs again. I've probably shouted them out before, but Big Baller Brand and LeVar and their family. Melo, I think 2 weeks ago, he's the first high school player to have his signature shoe. They premiered their reality TV show. Lonzo's probably going to drop a mixtape. So a lot of good stuff happened from the Ball family.
Did you watch anything from the show?
Oh yeah, I know that she was their mother Tina. She was having some issues, medical issues. So I think one of the episodes dedicated to her and how she's rehabbing and getting back, because that was one of the things that was happening during the March Madness tournament, and they were saying that Lonzo might have been kind of distracted by that, and he didn't really want to talk about it. So I guess he felt very strongly about it. So they had an episode about that. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. I hope it doesn't do the classic history of having a reality TV show about you is it goes downhill. You know, you look at Hogan Knows Best. You look at the Aussies, the Osbournes. So I hope it doesn't go that way, but, it's certainly no worse than the NCAA in my view. So, well, it'll at least be enjoyable. All right. Well, that has been the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through the site, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live every week, Tuesday or Wednesday. We've done Tuesday 2 weeks in a row. I'm so proud of us. At 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. You can catch the podcast version of us on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geeks show. Subscribe, upvote, it helps us out. And if you missed the live video show and want to catch it, you can catch that on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. Co-hosted, produced, everything by Boxscore Brian Foster. Don't know why I switched up the order, but Boxscore Brian on Twitter, Brian Foster in reality. And then co-host number 2, Andrew Sutton. That's all we got, and we'll see you next time.